Welcome back to the deep dive. We have, well, a massive stack of documents today, and I have to be honest with you. When I first looked at the sheer volume of what we're covering, I thought we were looking at a history textbook. I mean, we've got census data from the 1860s, we have court transcripts in the 1960s, and then these incredibly heated school board meeting minutes from, well, essentially yesterday, January 2026.
It does look like a history lesson on the surface, doesn't it? But I think if you read it that way, you miss the point. You miss the entire point.
Right, because usually we're looking at a specific event or,
Yeah.
maybe a breakthrough in tech. But today we are looking at a place, a specific geographic location.
Rutherford County, Tennessee.
Exactly. And the premise of the source material, this whole collection is titled Rutherford County, the Century of Resistance, is that this one county functions as a microcosm.
Yeah.
It's almost like a laboratory experiment for a much larger American story.
Laboratory is a good word for it. Or maybe a mirror. Because what we're seeing in these documents isn't just a series of random events that happen to occur in Tennessee. It's a case study in how a community, or at least a power structure within that community, creates a system, and specifically a system designed to resist change.
The Century of Resistance. That's the headline. And I want to push back on that title just for a second, right out of the gate, because resistance can mean a lot of things.
Sure.
It can be heroic, it can be stubborn. But here, the sources seem to be arguing that this resistance is, it's structural. Is that the right word?
It's absolutely structural, and that's the distinction we need to make really early on. We aren't talking about, a few grumpy people who don't like new stoplights.
Right.
We are talking about a timeline that stretches from the Civil War to the present day, where the same pattern repeats over and over and over again. The source material argues that the county doesn't just passively dislike modernization or integration.
It builds things.
It builds infrastructure to stop it.
Infrastructure. Okay, usually when you say infrastructure, I'm thinking roads, bridges, maybe a power grid. But you're talking about a social infrastructure.
I'm talking about legal frameworks. I'm talking about school zoning policies. I'm talking about the way history books are written and chosen. And yes, literal buildings, too.
Okay.
The argument here is that from the moment the Civil War ended, the power structure in this county began a project of containment. They were trying to contain the future.
And the future, in this context, means what exactly?
Equality.
Equality, integration, the free flow of information, basically anything that threatened the hierarchy that was established in 1860.
It's a bold claim. I mean, to say that a book ban in 2026 is directly connected to a plantation economy in 1860, that feels like a stretch, doesn't it?
It does.
That's 160 years.
It feels like a stretch if you look at history as a series of disconnected chapters. Yeah. Chapter 1, slavery. Yeah. Chapter 2, Jim Crow. Chapter 3, the internet.
But if you look at the evidence in this stack, and we're going to go through it piece by piece, you realize it's not chapters, it's a straight line.
A continuous narrative.
It's a continuous narrative arc. And I think the mission of this deep dive for us is to see if we can trace that line, to really follow the thread.
So we're testing the hypothesis.
Exactly. We're testing the hypothesis that the modern censorship, we're seeing these, 2,700 books under review in this county right now?
2,700. It's an unbelievable number.
It's staggering. And the hypothesis is that this isn't a new phenomenon. It's just the latest version of a very, very old strategy.
Okay, so if we're going to trace the line, we have to start at the dot, the beginning. And the sources take us all the way back to the eve of the Civil War. And there is one number here that I kept circling in my notes. I mean, it's a demographic statistic, but it feels like the smoking gun of the entire story.
55%.
55%. That was the percentage of the population in Rutherford County that was enslaved in 1860.
Let's just pause and sit with that number for a moment. 55%. More than half.
I looked up the national averages for context because
Yeah.
I want to see if that was, normal for the South at the time. It's high. It is incredibly high.
It's one of the highest in the entire nation. And this is so crucial for understanding the psychology of the place. There were plenty of places in the South where slavery existed, but maybe it was, 10% of the population or 20%. In those places, you could say slavery was part of the economy. But when you hit 55%, slavery is the economy. It's everything.
Right. It's not just a labor source anymore. It's the water the society swims in. It's the air you breathe.
It means that the entire social order, every single dinner party, every church service, every political decision is predicated on the fact that the majority of people in the county are considered property.
So the white population was a minority.
A significant minority. They weren't just governing, they were occupying. They were actively managing a population larger than themselves that they had to keep in total subjugation every single hour of every single day. The level of control required for that, it's immense.
And the level of fear.
Constant. It has to be.
So the resistance we're talking about, it has to start here, doesn't it? This is the foundational trauma, for lack of a better word.
It has to. Because think about what happens when the Civil War ends. Emancipation happens. All of a sudden, that 55%, the majority of the population, is free.
Legally free, anyway.
Legally free, yes. In a county with, say, 5% enslaved, emancipation is a huge disruption. In Rutherford County, with 55%, it's an apocalypse for the ruling class.
It's an absolute inversion of their entire universe.
Exactly. Their wealth, their social standing, their political power, it all evaporated overnight, or at least the legal basis for it did. And the source material makes this really, really sharp point. When the war ended, the county didn't simply move on.
You don't just get over that.
You don't just shrug off a worldview that deep. It's baked into generations.
You try to recreate it. You
Okay.
have to.
You scramble to find new ways to maintain the old order. The legal institution of slavery was gone, so they needed a new mechanism, a new system to ensure that the white minority remained in control of the black majority.
And that mechanism was, well, it became segregation, right?
Eventually.
Yeah.
But first, it was simpler than that. It was neglect. It was absolute systemic neglect and erasure. And that brings us to the second massive chunk of this deep dive, the era of black schools.
This section really got to me, I have to say, because often when we talk about this era, the late 1800s, early 1900s, we focus on what was done to black people, the violence, the Jim Crow laws. But the sources here highlight something else entirely. They highlight what black people did for themselves in the face of that neglect.
A miracle of self-determination. That's what the historian in the notes calls it. And it's the perfect description.
It really is.
Because the county, this entity that had just lost its slave labor, had absolutely zero interest in educating the children of formerly enslaved people. In fact, educating them was dangerous to the old order.
Of course. If you educate them, they might demand rights, they might demand fair wages, they might demand to vote.
Precisely. So the county simply refused to provide adequate schooling. They just didn't. But the black community didn't wait around for permission. They didn't wait for a handout. They built the schools themselves.
And we are talking about wealthy philanthropists writing checks here. We're talking about families who had almost nothing. Many of them were sharecroppers.
Families who were essentially being double taxed. Think about it. They paid their taxes to the county, which went almost exclusively to fund the white schools.
Right.
And then they scraped together their own money from their own pockets to buy land, to build buildings, to hire teachers for their own children. It's a staggering level of commitment.
The sources mention a few specific institutions that really anchor this part of the history. One of them is cemetery school.
Cemetery school, yes. It was a foundational institution in Murfreesboro. And the name itself, it sounds a little grim to our modern ears, maybe, but it was located near the cemetery.
Why there?
Because that was often the only land available for black institutions. It was land nobody else wanted.
The notes mention a Dr. Vincent Windrow. He seems central to preserving this memory.
Yes, Dr. Winder. He's a current community leader, and his mother attended cemetery school. So for him, this isn't ancient history from a book.
It's family.
It's family history. He's heavily involved in the preservation efforts now, and that preservation is a battle in itself because the physical place isn't there anymore.
Because the school isn't there.
The building is gone, the institution is closed, and this is a recurring theme we're going to see over and over. The black community built something powerful out of necessity and pride, and eventually the county system either swallows it up or erases it.
There's another school mentioned, Holloway High School. The notes call it the crown jewel.
Holloway High was massive. It was a big deal. It wasn't just a building with classrooms. It was the cultural heartbeat of the black community in Rutherford County.
The hub.
It was the hub. It had the sports teams, the choir, the debate club. It was where the community gathered for everything. It operated all the way until 1968.
1968. Okay, I want to put a pin in that date because we're going to come back to it. That's late. That is 14 years after Brown versus Board of Education.
It is incredibly late, and the fate of Holloway High is really the central tragedy of this era. When integration finally happened, when the county was forced kicking and screaming to integrate what happened to Holloway.
It didn't become the integrated high school for the town.
No, that would have been equal. They didn't bus white kids to Holloway. They closed Holloway as a high school. They stripped it of its status.
So what happened to the students?
The black students were reassigned to the formerly all-white schools, where they were often isolated, unwelcome, and their teachers and administrators from Holloway were demoted or let go. The institution that the black community had built for itself was effectively dismantled.
It feels like a punishment. It really does.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
the message was, okay, we have to integrate, but we're going to make sure it happens on our terms, and we are going to destroy your symbols of pride in the process.
That's the erasure part of the resistance we talk about. And then there's Bradley Academy, which is another key site.
That's a museum now, isn't it? I think I've seen pictures of it.
It is, and it's a cultural center. It's a beautiful building. But again, its existence today as a museum is a testament to the fact that the county wouldn't provide for black students in the first place.
Right.
It stands as a physical reminder of a system that said, we will not educate you, you have to do it yourself.
It's interesting how we frame these things, isn't it? We look at Bradley Academy now and we say, what a wonderful historic landmark. But really, it's evidence. It's evidence of the county's abdication of its most basic duty.
Exactly. And that abdication, that refusal, brings us right to the next phase of the resistance. We've moved from the 1860s economy to the building of black institutions. Now we need to talk about what happened when the federal government finally said, you can't do this anymore.
Section 3, the 17-year defiance.
17 years.
Just to set the timeline here for everyone, the Supreme Court rules in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. Segregation is unconstitutional. That's the law of the land.
Theoretically. In theory, yes.
Right. But in Rutherford County, Tennessee, full integration doesn't actually happen until 1971.
Think about that gap. 17 years. That is an entire childhood. A baby born in 1954, the year of the ruling, would be graduating high school in 1971.
So an entire generation of students went through a segregated system after it was declared illegal.
They were sacrificed to this delay. Absolutely.
So how does a county get away with that? How do you just ignore the Supreme Court of the United States for nearly 2 decades?
Well, that's the thing. You don't ignore it. You play games with it. You weaponize bureaucracy. You create a maze of policies.
You pretend to comply.
You pretend to comply. The source material outlines the tactics, and they are maddeningly clever. The main tool they used was something called freedom of choice.
Which sounds great. I mean, who doesn't love freedom? Who doesn't love choice?
That's the branding. It's brilliant in a cynical way. The idea was, we aren't segregating anyone. Any student can choose to go to any school they want.
But there was a catch.
There was a massive catch. If you were a black student and you chose to go to the white school, you were essentially walking into a fortress. There was no busing provided, so you had to find your own way, sometimes miles away.
And the social pressure must have been immense.
Unbelievable. You faced social ostracization from white students and teachers, and your parents faced threats to their employment, to their housing. It was a choice in name only. It was a choice designed to be impossible to make.
And I'm guessing very few white students chose to go to the black schools.
Practically zero. Why would they? The black schools had been systematically underfunded for decades. So the Freedom of Choice Plan resulted in a handful of token black students in white schools and nothing else. It was a stalling tactic designed to look like compliance while maintaining the status quo.
And the source notes say that Rutherford County was the last county in the entire state of Tennessee to fully integrate.
The very last one. And one of the last holdouts in the entire South. That is a specific kind of distinction. You have to work really, really hard to be the last one. You have to really not want to do it.
So what broke the stalemate? What finally happened?
The federal courts finally lost their patience. They'd seen these freedom of choice plans all over the South and realized they were a sham. So in 1968, the courts ordered immediate total integration.
No more plans.
No more plans, no more gradualism. The order was, do it now.
But even then, the timeline says 1971. That's 3 years after the order.
Right. Even after the court order, the county dragged its feet. They used every administrative and legal maneuver they could think of. It took 3 more years of federal oversight, lawsuits, and constant pressure to actually get the bodies in the classrooms.
So 1971 comes around. Legal resistance to integration has finally officially failed. They have to open the door.
The dam breaks, the legal dam, anyway.
And this is the real pivot point of the whole deep drive, isn't it? The resistance doesn't stop. It just moves. It changes form.
The water finds a new crack in the wall. Always.
Okay, let's talk about that. Section 4, the architecture of white flight. Because while the county lawyers were fighting in court to keep the public schools segregated, some people were busy building lifeboats.
Lifeboats is a generous term. The sources are pretty clear on this. I'd call them fortresses. We need to talk about Middle Tennessee Christian School, MTCS.
Now, this is a private school in the county. From what I understand, a very popular, well-regarded school today.
It is. It has a great reputation now. But we have to look at its origins. We have to look at the birth certificate, so to speak.
Yeah.
MTCS was founded in 1962.
1962. Okay, so that's 8 years after Brown v. Board.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the freedom of choice charade.
The timing is not a coincidence. The source material is very, very clear on this. The expert analysis in these documents frames MTCS not just as a school, but as a segregation academy.
That's a loaded term.
Yeah.
A very loaded term.
It is, but it's a specific historical term. All across the South, in the 50s and 60s, as it became clear that public schools would eventually have to integrate, hundreds of these private schools started popping up. And they were chartered specifically to provide a place for white families to send their children where they wouldn't have to go to school with black children.
But they didn't put that on the brochure, right? I mean, the marketing material didn't say, come here to avoid integration.
No, of course not. That would be uncouth. They used coded language. The source material highlights the phrases that were used at the time. Things like a wholesome Christian environment, traditional moral values, and the big one, protecting our children.
Protecting our children. That phrase does a lot of heavy lifting. It always has.
It does. In the context of 1962 Tennessee, what were they protecting them from? The source argues that protecting children meant protecting them from social equality. It meant ensuring they didn't have to share a classroom or a lunch table or a water fountain with the descendants of the people their ancestors owned.
And did it work? Was it effective?
It worked incredibly well. MTCS opened its doors with an all-white student body. And as the public schools finally, reluctantly integrated in the early 70s, you saw this massive transfer of resources.
A white flight.
White flight, exactly. White families with the financial means pulled their kids out of the public system and sent them to private schools like MTCS.
So just at the moment when black students finally get access to the public resources, a significant chunk of the capital, both financial and social, flees the system.
It's the 55% logic all over again. If we can't control the public space anymore, we will create a parallel private space that we can control. We will build a wall that the Supreme Court can't touch.
And this brings us to the next layer of the resistance. Because we've talked about physical separation schools, zoning. But there's also mental separation. If you can't fully separate the bodies anymore, you have to separate the narrative. You have to control the story.
Section 5. Controlling the narrative, the lost cause.
This is where we get into what the source calls curriculum engineering.
Which sounds like a modern conspiracy theory, but it's actually just documented American history. After the Civil War, groups like the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the UDC, launched a massive, decades-long campaign.
And this wasn't just about building statues in town squares, though that was part of it.
The statues were the public-facing part. The real work was quieter. They were lobbying school boards. They were pressuring publishers.
They wanted to control the textbooks.
They wanted to rewrite the entire story of the Civil War for future generations. They pushed this narrative that we now call the lost cause.
And what are the tenets of that?
The core ideas were that slavery wasn't really the cause of the war, that it wasn't that bad, that most enslaved people were happy and loyal to their masters, that the war was really about states' rights and noble Southern traditions against Northern aggression.
The War of Northern Aggression. I definitely grew up hearing that phrase.
A lot of people did. And that wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate, very successful public relations and educational strategy. The source quotes a UDC strategist from that era saying, "If you control what children learn, you control what they believe."
It's gaslighting on a generational scale.
It is, absolutely. Okay. And the goal was to make sure that even if the South lost the military war on the battlefield, they won the cultural war in the classroom. They wanted to ensure that future generations of white children wouldn't feel ashamed of the past.
Because if you feel shame, you might feel a responsibility to fix things in the present.
Precisely. If slavery was a benevolent institution, then you don't owe anyone reparations. You don't need a Civil Rights Act. You don't need to change anything.
It sanitizes the history to protect the present hierarchy.
Exactly. And this is where the deep dive connects all those dots directly to 2026. Because the expert in our source material argues that this lost cause campaign is the direct ancestor, the blueprint for the modern book ban movement.
It's the same impulse. Don't let the kids read anything that makes the dominant culture look bad or feel uncomfortable.
It's the exact same impulse. Which brings us to Section 6, the modern battlefield.
Okay, let's jump to today, January 2026. The county can no longer legally segregate schools, They can't legally exclude black students from the classroom?
Right. The physical battle over bodies in buildings was lost in 1971.
So now the battle is over information. It's over ideas.
The source material puts it very bluntly. They have moved from segregating bodies to segregating ideas.
The numbers here are just, they're shocking. We mentioned it in the intro, but I really want to dig into it. 2,700 books.
2,700 books have been placed under some form of review or scrutiny in the Rutherford County school system.
That's not a parental concern about one or two books. That's a purge. That's an industrial scale operation.
It's a systemic sweep. And when you look at the list of books, when you look at the targets, it's not random. It's highly specific. It follows a very clear pattern.
So what are we seeing on the list? What are the themes?
Well, it's exactly what you'd expect, given the history we just discussed.
Yeah.
A huge number of the challenges are against books about Black history or by Black authors.
Of course.
Anything that deals with LGBTQ plus identities or characters, stories about diverse families, immigrant experiences.
But it goes further than that, doesn't it? I was looking at the list, and it includes books about puberty.
Yeah.
And mental health.
Oh, yeah. Sexual health, trauma, anxiety, depression. Basically, anything that acknowledges the messy, complex reality of being a human being, especially if you aren't a straight, white, neurotypical male, is suspect.
It's like they are trying to curate a fictional reality for students where those things simply don't exist.
It's a profound narrowing of the world. They were trying to create an intellectual bubble where the lost cause version of the world, a sanitized, simple version, can still survive.
There is a specific example in the source that I think really illustrates how absurd this has gotten. A book called Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History.
Yes, this is a children's picture book, a beautifully illustrated book.
It's a book about astronauts and scientists and artists. It's celebratory. It's not graphic. There's no explicit content, and yet it's on the list to be reviewed.
It's on the list, and this is where the protecting children argument just completely falls apart. Because how are you protecting a child by preventing them from reading about Katherine Johnson, the Black female mathematician who helped send men to the moon?
Well, you're not. Unless the thing you are protecting them from is the knowledge that Black women can be brilliant mathematicians.
Bingo. That's the threat. The threat is equality. The threat is Black excellence. It challenges the old hierarchy.
There's a quote in the source material that I found really, really telling. It's from a parent in the county, and the notes are very specific that this isn't some woke activist. This is a conservative resident.
Right. They self-identify as a far cry from work. A regular parent.
But they did something most people don't. They actually looked at the list. They did the homework. They pulled up 5 of the challenge books at random.
And what did they find? They're quoted as saying, 4 out of the 5 books I just looked at were about Black history. This is bad.
This is bad. It's such a simple, plain statement, but it represents a crack in the wall, doesn't it?
It does. It shows that the censorship has become so aggressive, so clumsy, that even people who might be politically sympathetic to the county leadership are starting to look at it and say, wait a minute, this isn't about porn in the library. This is about erasing people.
It's the overreach. They just flew too close to the sun with it.
They got greedy. The lost cause only works if it's subtle. When you start banning picture books about Black American heroes, the racism becomes undeniable. The quiet part gets very, very loud.
So we have this massive institutional machine of censorship. But, and this is the hopeful part of the story, where there's resistance to change, there is also resistance to the resistance.
Section 7, the resistance to the resistance.
The pushback, the counter-movement.
And this is so important, because the story of Rutherford County isn't just a story of oppression. It's a story of people fighting back generation after generation. We saw it with the families building the Black schools in the 1900s, and we see it now.
So who are the fighters today? Who's on the front lines?
One of the key figures mentioned in the documents is Allison Belt. She's a library board member.
And she's not a professional agitator. She's
Yeah.
not an ACLU lawyer. She's a local.
She's a neighbor, a volunteer, and she has this great quote where she reflects on her role, and she says she didn't expect to be defending democracy at age 45 by protecting librarians.
I love that line. It really grounds the stakes. She probably thought being on the library board meant, approving the budget for new carpet or something.
Exactly. And suddenly she's standing between a furious mob and the First Amendment. But she's doing it. She's calling out the harmful decisions. She's the one who held up a copy of Little Leaders at a board meeting and asked, what are we so afraid of?
And she's not alone.
No, not at all. There's the Rutherford County Library Alliance. This is a grassroots group that's formed. It's parents, students, teachers, librarians, just concerned citizens who have organized themselves.
And what are they doing?
They track the book challenges, they show up to the school board meetings and speak, they educate the public on what's actually in these books, they're fact-checking the outrage.
It really parallels the self-determination of the segregation era. The system fails you, so you build your own support network. You organize.
It is the exact same energy. It's the community saying, if the county won't protect our freedom to read, we will do it ourselves.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. I mean, we've gone from 1860 to 2026. We've talked about economics, architecture, law, and literature. Let's try to pull this all together. Section 8, the through line, connecting the dots.
This is where we have to stack the evidence.
Yeah.
If you lay it all out, if you look at the whole picture, what do we see?
Okay.
We see a society built on a 55% enslaved population, creating a psychology of control.
We see the deliberate destruction of Black institutions like Holloway High at the moment of integration.
We see 17 years of active bureaucratic defiance against the Supreme Court.
We see the creation of private escape hatch schools like MTCS, timed perfectly to facilitate white flight.
We see a century of lost cause curriculum engineering to control the historical narrative.
And now we see 2,700 books, overwhelmingly by or about minorities, being targeted for removal.
When you list it like that,
Yeah.
it's overwhelming, it's undeniable.
It is, but it leads to a verdict. The expert conclusion in these sources is that this is a single, continuous system of control. It's not a series of accidents. It's not just the way things are. It was built. It was designed.
If it was
It
built,
was built for a reason.
fear.
Fear.
Fear of the future. The expert argues that at its absolute core, this is all about a fear of modernization, a fear of a world where the old, simple hierarchy doesn't exist anymore, where power has to be shared.
It's a fundamental refusal to accept reality.
It's a refusal to modernize. The rest of the world is moving forward. Ideas are spreading. Cultures are mixing. The internet has made information unstoppable. And this county, or at least the power structure within it, is frantically building walls to try and keep that future out.
But walls don't work forever, especially not against ideas.
No, the water always finds a way in.
So what's the final thought here? What's the takeaway? What does the source material leave us with?
It ends with a challenge, and it's a tough one. It's a direct challenge to the community itself.
Lay it on us.
The central argument is that Rutherford County cannot truly move forward. It cannot become a modern, healthy, pluralistic community until it stops rewriting its own history.
It has to face the ghosts in the attic.
It has to. It has to acknowledge the 55%. It has to acknowledge the theft of the Black schools and what that meant. It has to admit why MTCS was built in 1962. And it has to put the books back on the shelf.
It's like a therapy session for an entire county. You can't heal the trauma if you keep denying the trauma ever happened.
Exactly. The source makes the point that the enemy isn't the truth. The enemy isn't the books. The enemy is the fear. The fear that if people, especially young people, learn the full story, they will start asking really uncomfortable questions.
Questions like, why? And who benefits from us not knowing this?
And that leads to the final rhetorical call to action in the material. The question isn't, will the county change? Because clearly, left to its own devices, it will resist change for another century.
So the real question is,
Who will stand up and force it to?
who is the next Allison Bell? Who is the next parent who actually reads the banned list and says, wait a second, this is bad?
That's the challenge. The deep dive isn't just a history lesson. The source is arguing that it's a recruitment drive for reality, for confronting the past to build a different future.
And it's happening right now, January 2026. The story isn't over.
Not even close. The school board meets again next Tuesday.
Well, that is a lot to process, but it's a necessary conversation. I want to thank you for walking us through this stack. It's heavy, but it clarifies so much about the news we see every single day.
It's always good to look beneath the surface. That's where the real story is. That's where the pattern emerges.
Absolutely. This has been The Deep Dive. We're going to leave you with that question. Who will stand up? Take care of yourselves. Keep reading, especially the books they tell you not to. And we'll see you next time.
Take care.